during these uncertain times, and nobody knows what's coming next. Some of us don't remember what happened over the last few months. My name's Josh with Gazelle Sports. I'm joined by Lewis and Silas from the Gazelle League Racing Team, and Dr. K from Metro Health Sports Medicine here in Grand Rapids. Thanks, guys, for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
I want to start first, Lewis and Silas. Tell us a little bit about what it was like as the total weight of the whole last 6 months kind of started to set in over the spring, and how you guys handled that.
Yeah, well, when COVID first kind of hit, our coach at the time, David, pretty much separated us right away into our training groups very responsibly. So Bryce and Leah and myself all kind of started training together. Silas and Megan, who used to be on the team as well, they kind of fractured off a little bit as well. We just felt that was the most safe thing, and it was fine for a couple of days, and then we realized, like, oh man, we don't know the next time we're going to be able to train with these people that we're so used to training with. And for me, at least, that's when the gravity really started to set in. When we started to really lock down, and we actually kind of even split households a little bit to be as safe as we could. I think that's when I was like, oh man, things are not going to be the same for quite a while. And we kind of had to, at least I had to kind of shift my mentality from, oh, this sucks, to, well, this is cool. Like, I can really just focus on training, and that's about it for quite a while. That was the advantage for me.
I actually came down with a pretty bad injury shortly after it started, so for a while I wasn't doing much training at all, but even in the build-up after that, probably 2-3 months ago, I realized that it wasn't going away in any time frame that we had expected. And at that point, I was just spent a lot of energy focusing more on the day-to-day and not getting I don't want to say getting my hopes up, but setting unrealistic expectations for when things were going to get back to normal, and just focus on what I was able to do. And I've been able to, mentally manage that a lot easier, because everything could start going again tomorrow and I'd be ready for it, or as ready as I could be, or it could be another year and I'll be ready for that too. Just focusing more on the short term and what I'm able to accomplish training wise in the situation, and that's been pretty smart.
Dr. K, when this all started, what was kind of your biggest concern for athletes, and curious has that changed or morphed at all over the last few months?
Good question. Like these guys were saying at the beginning, we didn't know exactly how long this was going to last, where it was going to take us, and really what was going to happen. We knew people would get sick and that it was easy to spread to other people, but we didn't know what kind of short-term and maybe long-term effects there were. And so what we told people is just what they did, is try it and sort of separate yourselves, stay with your household. I had kids who are in college sports, and they were getting ready for outdoor track at the time, and so they actually both moved home at that point, just because there were so many. We were trying to keep people in small groups at a time, but the problem was that their groups were changing, and so they didn't get the fact that it was sort of the same small group they wanted, not just a changing small group. And so at the beginning it was like, okay, what is going to be the effect kind of training, and how's it going to go in? Is it going to affect the whole track season, which it obviously did, and is it going to affect in summer and fall? And then the other part, which I think early on, for those of us who exercise, and I run, not certainly like these guys run, but I run as well, is the whole mental aspect of it. And people identify with, hey, I'm a runner, I'm a track athlete, I'm a cross-country runner, and what is that going to mean if that changes? If you identify with that, that changes a little bit. So for me, it was the physical aspect of it. What are people going to, if they get sick, what does it mean? How are they going to recover? And then also, what is it going to mean for identity if you're not with your team, if you're not able to do the things you want to do? And so, and I think obviously at the time we didn't know how long that was going to play out, and obviously it still is playing out. But I think we know, which we'll touch on a little bit. I think we know. Unfortunately, what we know is that it's going to go on a little bit longer. But I think we also know that there are things you can absolutely do safely, and we'll touch upon those things I think going forward here. What can you do? How can you do it safely? And how can you sort of kind of create seasons, even though a season might not be going on, or a season might be started. Like for high schoolers, sometimes the season is going to be starting. Is it going to continue? What's it going to look like? And the good news is I think in a short period of time we have learned some things about it as well. Like can.
Silas, can you speak to that identity issue a little bit? Obviously, you identify as an athlete, so
Right.
having that season lost, I mean, how does that affect? How do you handle that?
Like I mentioned earlier, I got really injured, so it really threw me for a loop, COVID notwithstanding. But I have been extremely committed to the sport for 10 years at this point, and I've been living this life post-collegiately for a couple years now, so I was never going to let this get in the way. I kind of took the mindset of, to use a pretty stupid analogy, like a caterpillar going into a cocoon at this point, where I can entirely focus on my training. I don't have a race to rest for, so I can push the envelope in certain ways that I wouldn't be able to if I was trying to race. So mostly just realizing that even this presents certain opportunities that, although I can't race with other people, there has been time trials going on, solo time trials or small group time trials with the team and things like that, and just like focusing on the new opportunities that it does present and how I can dedicate this sort of chaotic energy to those.
You've had a lot of changes over the last few months, in addition to everything else going on in the world. But how has your sense of self kind of morphed?
I was totally fine. I didn't have a single issue through this pandemic. I feel similar to Silas. I mean, I do associate myself really closely with this sport, and I take a lot of pride in my efforts in this sport, and I'm proud of how far I've come. And so to think about something occurring that could like slow down that progress that I was making and maybe throw a wrench in the whole system was disturbing to me. And positivity isn't necessarily like a strength of mine. I do find myself to be quite pessimistic at times, or at the very least, like I would describe it as realistic. But I really struggled to switch that mindset, and for me, that was the biggest challenge of the pandemic when it came to this sport. Because I think, willingly or not, we do all tie ourselves up into something that we are good at. At whatever level, if you tasted success, you want more of it, and to think about something that just is going to mess with that is like the most painful experience. And especially with us on the Gazelle racing team, where we were such a tight-knit group and had to just get split, that did damage as well. So, switching that mindset from this whole thing just blows to now, okay, how can I essentially got the chance to view even my loss of employment as like a positive thing, because now I didn't go into work every day and be on my feet for like 8 hours at a time. I could run, nap, eat, run again if I felt like it, and then do the whole thing over and over, and it felt amazing. My training kind of took off. So the identity thing was something that was gradual, but I do feel like I came out of this, we're out of the pandemic, but we came out of this whole, the really, really tough, isolated parts of it for the better. Yeah.
Dr. K, a lot of people around the world, but certainly in this area, are dealing with some mental health issues, whether that's some depression, anxiety from the unknown, from being locked down, from being isolated, from losing things that they love. What are some warning signs that people can look for either in themselves or in a friend that are kind of good indicators that maybe something more serious is going on than just being down?
You're exactly right. We all have a threshold. Even the most optimistic people have a threshold that, given the right circumstances, can make someone depressed or anxious. And what the pandemic did is just like lower that threshold. So now it's easier to get there. So even me, who I consider myself an optimistic person, find myself at times really kind of bogged down by this whole thing. And so what I would try to look for myself, or look for in patients or family members or anybody else come across, would be, it's not unusual to lose a little bit of interest in doing something, but to completely lose complete interest in something you like to do. So if you like to run, you get up and you run every day, it's something you do, and then suddenly you can't do it anymore. Now we all go through periods of times where in our training it gets hard we don't like it, we may be a little bit injured, we may be a little bit burned out, we may be overtrained, but if it really turns into, well, I just can't get going, I can't get motivated, things I like to do. And it may be things you like running, like you're talking about, that you like to do, but it also might be other things. I like to go to the movies. Well, around here we can't go to the movies right now, right? So, but at least I could find maybe something on TV. So if I wasn't even interested in looking or finding something on TV, or you just an inability, you sleep all the time, or that type of thing. It's certainly one of the big things we look for. Is just that loss of the things that you like to do, and we all know the pandemic took some of those things we like to do, made them impossible, like going to a movie right now. But if there's things that are possible that you can do and you just don't like to do that anymore, or a profound sense of sadness. Again, like I said, we all have different levels or different areas that we're going to be affected by anxiety or depression. It's normal to have some anxiety about things. It's normal to feel down about things. But if that becomes the overwhelming, the prevailing mood that you have, and you just feel like everything is negative, and it's hard to fight that sometimes, or to know if that's coming from me or if that's coming from outside, because you turn on the TV or you read anything, and right now it is a lot of negative things. That's unfortunately what's going on, yes, but also what sells, and so that's all you hear about is the negative and the negative and the negative. But it's just becoming so profound, and oftentimes other people notice, right? So I've had both kind of in my family members, and in patients, and in good friends of mine, people will say, so-and-so is just not themselves. And sometimes that so-and-so can tell, and if you talk to them about it, they can tell that they're not themselves, and sometimes it's harder. But a lot of times it is, if someone says, you're not acting like you normally do, you don't seem to be yourself. I have patients describe me kind of a short fuse. They get bothered really easy. I mean, we all have days like that, but if every day becomes a day like that, where everything bothers you all the time, that might be a sign too that something's not quite right. But again, I always tell people, listen to the people that you know love you, and if they're saying that something's not right, and oftentimes it's harder sometimes yourself to see that, but if someone else is telling you that, it may be time to at least talk to somebody. It never hurts to talk to somebody. It's hard to do sometimes. It's hard to reach out, talk to a family member, talk to a friend, come in and see the doctor. I've had more people come and see me about this right now because of just what we talked about. That threshold is lowered, and more people, and they're coming in, and I say, what, I try to make it easy. Just tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're feeling. This is all normal. I tell people too, if you go to the doctor and you hurt your knee, you might leave and just tell your friends, hey, I went to the doctor, I hurt my knee, I'm getting an MRI. You oftentimes don't go, hey, I went to the doctor and I talk about depression and I'm going to maybe go on medication. So I think we think it's a lot less out there than it is. And so I try to tell people that even though it's not discussed as much, you're not alone. This is not an abnormal feeling that you're having, and there's probably a lot more people that are going through the same thing, you're just not talking about it. So long answer, but those are the types of things we're looking for. And oftentimes, like I said, if a family member, a relative, a friend is talking to you about, hey, you just don't seem yourself, that's the time to maybe take a step back and kind of self-assess and say, hey, maybe I am not myself right now.
Louis, you mentioned earlier how you guys are such a tight-knit team. I'm curious how you guys were able to come together, speaking to something like that, and kind of be the support system for each other.
Yeah, well, the positive side of, I think, that period was that it revealed a lot about a lot of us. It revealed a lot about ourselves to ourselves and then to each other, because up until that point, we were spending a lot of time together, but when we were on lockdown, we were really only hanging out with our training partners. And so they're the people who here that really just, you already get pretty intimate with conversation on runs, right? But in the middle of a pandemic, it's just, it's multiplied. So for us, I think, I know Silas and I struggle with a lot of the same issues. And Leah is quite open about her mental health problems as well, mental health issues, and I think that kind of brought us closer together in the end, and we used it for a good thing because we realized, like, man, if I'm not there for that person, like, how can I expect them to be there for me? And it was just like this give and take thing that largely went unsaid for a long time, but it was brought to light through the pandemic. And on top of that app house party was like a lifesaver. Like, we would just jump on house party after every workout or every long run and just like review it if we weren't together, and just talk and kind of like celebrate the fact that we were still hanging in there. that was it. Yeah.
Silas, how was it different for you being injured on top of everything else?
I really just saw everybody less than anybody else. I didn't leave my apartment for probably weeks, just because I didn't have a reason to. But yeah, at that point, I can't. It's honestly hard to understate how much of a lifesaver house party was for all of us. We would spend, a good few, 5-6 hours a week just hanging out with, everybody on the team on house party, and all the people would jump in and out, whoever we wanted to talk to, and it really let us get those social sort of, we call them merges, I guess, because the word's coming to my head. Get those things out and just exposure, because even as much as we had to, get in small groups and quote-unquote quarantine, for the health of everybody, it can be pretty trying, just seeing the same person 24 hours a day for weeks and weeks and weeks, and that just helped, provide a little bit of an outlet.
Dr. K, what are some of the better strategies that you've seen people employ during this time to kind of stay in a good spot? You guys bring up a really good point. The whole message we're getting, and as physicians we're giving, is avoid people, avoid crowds, avoid going out, stay inside. And obviously, as human beings, that's like the worst thing that we can do. Even I've talked to some friends of mine who are pretty much antisocial people. They're sort of like, even this is too antisocial for me. You know what I mean? Like I can't take this. So doing things, figuring, okay, how, if we can't physically get together, how can we get together? House party, whatever you're going to do. My daughter, again, spent a lot of time with her. Me and my wife said we counted it as a blessing. Our kids were home when we didn't expect them to be home. So we had some time then, which is 90% of the time was great, and 10% of the time I think we were all like, okay, you got to go now. But anyway, she would get with her friends too, and she's probably the most social of all of us. And so I hear her, on her phone or computer, doing lots of different things. So try to get together with people that you can, even if you can't get there with them physically. Obviously, the good news is with all the apps and the social media that we have, we can still do that. This has been a lot different pandemic 10 years ago. So utilize those type of things. Utilize your family members. Like I said, the good news is that we were all together for a long time, and the bad news we were all together for a long time. And for the most part, it was good. And so, my daughter and my wife are big game players. I'm not a very big game player, but I would sometimes say, I'm going to play a game because that gets me involved with what they're doing. And so I would sort of step out of my comfort zone a little bit and do those types of things because I knew it would be good for them, but I also knew it would be good for me to stay engaged. The good part about probably most of the people we're talking with here is that they're probably runners or athletes of some sort. And one of the things that is good to do, still is good to do, and can be done safely, is to get out and go for a run. So even though we couldn't get out and go to the movies or couldn't get together in a party, we could still go out and run. And at first it was run maybe with your spouse or a training partner or whatever it was, a friend, and so you want to keep that group real low. And then as we learn more about how to slow the spread down, we knew that we could train with a larger group as long as you were spread out. And then we knew that when you're running, that you weren't going to transmit to somebody else because you weren't standing still long enough for the virus, and it would go. If you're outdoors, it's going to spread a lot more, or it's going to go away a lot more than it would if you're indoors. And so getting out for a run, and that was for me the biggest thing. I cover lots of events. Well, guess what? Right now, there's not a lot of events to cover, right? So I come home from my job, and my identity is go to events and cover events. It's part of my identity. Well, when you don't have those events to cover, I got a lot more chores done around the house, got a lot more trimming in my backyard done, but I also was able to keep up with my runs more now than ever. And to what these guys are saying, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of races where I could go and then see, kind of how fit am I and what, how my race is going to go. But for me, I would get into that mindset, well, I'm going to train like there is a race coming, because that would get me to do some speed workouts, some tempo workouts, and stuff like that. So it would keep me going. And so it's finding whatever that is, because for some people it might be keeping up with a workout schedule. For other people, it might be, say, dialing back and saying, I'm just going to get out 3 or 4 times a week and do an easy run, but at least getting it out. So trying to make it as normal as possible in these abnormal times. So keeping a schedule, putting it on the calendar, getting out for a run. Those are the types of things that help try to make it seem more normal, even when it's not. I'm a big baseball fan, so when the Tigers and I'm from LA, the Dodgers started playing again, it was, I could tune in and sort of pretend that was kind of normal as well. And so finding those things
that sort of remind you of normal life. And that doesn't mean you're ignoring what's going on. It doesn't mean you don't care about what's going on. Because sometimes I think we battle with ourselves. If I'm enjoying something, that means I'm forgetting about the people who are suffering. Well, no, you're just trying to make sure you're the best person you can be so that you can then help take care of someone else. Because there's probably someone else you're going to run into who's going to need some help. And so you're trying to be the best you can to help other people out.
You guys are competitive athletes.
Not lately.
Not lately, right? So how have you redefined what success looks like in this time?
You know, coming off the injury, it was pretty easy. I was glad to be training again, especially now, having taken such a large break. And I still just come out and say it, when I got hurt, I got mega depressed. It was pretty bad. And it basically took a month off. It was basically like a break for everything because I just didn't have the energy to do anything. And coming off of that, being able to train again, I was a lot more thankful just to be able to train and be healthy. And we got, with the help of Dr. K, got a couple of underlying issues under control. And everything was feeling better. And so I was just happy to be training. And just to see, at this point, my fitness get better almost with every run for a while. And even now, week to week, that helped a lot. And I did set some, I did have a new coach now. We set some sort of moderate term to medium term goals to keep me focused. Some measurables and some opportunities to run hard and run fast and just see what happens. So just similar to earlier when I talked about focusing on what I could do every day and not having any certain expectations. I did, with as much as I do know that I can do, I did set realistic goals and opportunities to improve my fitness within everything that's going on. It's the same thing, sort of focusing on what I can do every day to get better so that when I can't race again, I'll be better.
For me, it was a bit more of like an intentional shift in how I was actually training. I think before it was like I would get up early in the morning and then like cram a run in and then be at work all day and then try and get enough sleep so I could do it the next day. But now I had so much more time on my hands. I found much more enjoyment on my easy days, really taking it easy. When I quarantined with Leah, we would go out and just like trot at whatever pace. We wouldn't even look at our watch. We take Harper, the golden retriever, with it really slows things down visually. But that then allowed me time and like the energy levels to then really hit the workout days hard, and that was like my competitive goals. So I kind of managed to find a balance a little bit between that, fulfilling my competitive drive, but also maintaining like enjoyment in the sport and in the activity itself. I say that was intentional, it really was unintentional, I did not plan that out, but it happened to work out really well. And then we kind of just like freckled in some time trials and stuff here and there. And the time trials were really what like motivated me, because for me, I don't necessarily need to, I'm an extremely competitive person, but I don't necessarily need to show up to a race to fulfill that. I'm perfectly happy competing against myself if need be. And so us setting up like little 2-mile time trials or just like fun events that we would do where we could put in a hard effort and like feel the pain that we missed, but then have it like sustainable so that we could continue on, because we didn't know how long things would last. So none of us were trying to be burned out. We were just trying to like just keep our heads engaged enough. And people like Silas and I, who our heads were really not engaged during that time, were really low. It was just the little things here and there that it seemed to be what helped in terms of our relationship to the sport, which was in jeopardy, I feel like, if I'm being honest. It really felt like at times, like, why am I doing this? And it just hurts mentally to be doing this right now. So, I don't know, just like finding that joy again was the most difficult part, but also the most rewarding once we got there.
So there are a lot of high school runners, athletes watching right now. We've got school. Some schools have started. Some are starting here in the next week or 2 weeks. Cross-country seasons have started. So So races are in, and yet there's still all kinds of uncertainty about how long that's going to last. Are we going to get to the end of the season? Are we going to have championships? Dr. K, any advice for kids trying to navigate this, what's already a weird, hard time in life, and already a weird, hard time with a pandemic, and having those two crammed together at the same time?
Great question. And we talked about it like 3 times in the office today, so it's a very important question. Right now, it's a bunch of zigzag, right? So we know there's a lot we don't know, but we try to make plans, and again, like the school openings and races or not races, or how big the race is going to be, or is it going to be a JV race or varsity racing, and all these things are going on. And so it's like you're going this way for about 3 days, and suddenly you're going that way. So well, that part's going to be there for a while. So try to get used to it. Don't be okay with it, like in the sense that you'll be like, well, this the rest of my life is going to be like this. But be okay with it in the short term. That that it's going to zig and zag. And I hear talking to parents, talking to kids, frustration, and sometimes it's directed at schools or coaches or people who are sort of the decision makers. And I try to tell people, I think we all want the same thing. So whether or not a school is open or not open, or it's open part-time, or you decide as a parent to send your child or to not send your child, everybody's working from trying to get the same point, safety of their child or of the athlete. So I'd say keep that in mind. Know that every decision that's being made is trying to be made with the safety of you, the person involved. And it doesn't mean you're going to be okay with every decision. COVID's been a big reset button for a lot of things, right? So even in my line of work, so I'm a physician, and COVID is an illness. So that means that my business should be great because I deal with sick people. Well, guess what? COVID was when we all had to kind of go into kind of shutdown mode and prepare for the worst mode. A lot of things didn't happen at hospitals that used to happen, and so we even had people at our work get laid off, which seems kind of counterintuitive when you're dealing with a medical problem. So my point is that there's some decisions that were made that I could say that I don't know if I totally agreed with it at the time because it didn't seem right. But I also did say I didn't know if I had the right answer because I knew we were zigzagging. So just know that decisions are being made, even if it's frustrating, are being made with your best intention in mind. And so know that right now there's going to be a little zig and a little zag. Take your identity. It's okay if you identify, I'm a runner, I'm an athlete, I'm a college athlete, I'm a high school athlete. Take that and be proud of that, but know that you're more than that. So if cross-country season ends up starting in the high school lane and ends up not going as well as we hope, again, my son's in college and his already is done before it started, right? They're going to do some things, but the season, there's no championships and stuff. And so they're trying to do some things to make it seem like a season. And so just look for those things and say, and know that, you're a runner, you identify as a runner, and it's okay to do that, but also know that you're a human being, and you're an important human being. And whether or not you run or not might disappoint you, and it's okay that it does that, and it's okay to mourn that. Just like, Silas was sort of mourning the injury when you had that. That's okay to do. But then you know that you're going to get over this. We're going to get through this, and it's easy for us to say that, you know what I mean? And I don't mean that to sound trite, but we will. We'll come out on the other side of this. And the zigzagging is going to get a lot less zigzagging, a little more straight. And you're going to look back, we're all going to look back, and this is going to make most of us better people. Make sure you're one of those people who makes you a better person, and own that part of it. Own the part that says, I don't like what's going on, I don't like that it's messing up my cross-country season, I don't like it's messing up my school, but I'm still a human being, I'm still moving forward, and at the end of this, whatever, I'm going to be better for it, and then I'm going to move on. And so make sure your identity is you, and that you're growing through this. It's tricky right now, and we don't know what's going to happen. Know that the health, that what you're doing is healthy for you as well. That training, that running, that even if you're not being able to racing, that your health is impacted by this. COVID-19 is a disease that is very transmissible. We know that, and it's also unfortunately hitting elderly and people with medical conditions disproportionately. And sometimes you can't control that. I'm getting more elderly every day, right? So I can't control that part of it. But I can control maybe, am I trying to be as healthy as I can? Am I eating right? Am I trying to maintain my weight? This disease is one that you can take some control over it and say, if I'm as healthy as possible as I can be, that even if I get it, I might be able to fight this off. So you have a little control to do that as well. So know that the health, if you're training, you're running, you're involved, then your health is going to be better for it as well. And that's, again, an important thing moving forward. And find those things that make life seem a little bit normal right now. Even if they're little simple little things, find those things that make life seem normal and go with those for a little bit. And just be prepared for the bumps for a little bit. And then we'll get through this.
10 years from now, this is way in the rear view. What do you two, as athletes, hope to remember about this experience and lessons that you want to carry with you?
For me, I'm going to be proud that I recognized that something was wrong, or something was maybe not wrong, but something was just like a little bit worse and more difficult to handle than it normally is for me, and that I put in the work or I am putting in the work to do something about that. For a long time, it was my struggles with depression were just something that I allowed to just kind of take over, and I refused to acknowledge it. And a lot of people do that apparently, but it was something that eventually I had to put my foot down, and in the middle of a pandemic seemed as good a time as any, honestly, because there were just so many changes, and thankfully I was surrounded by one particular person, but also a variety of people that, regardless of whether or not they shared those struggles, they felt for me, and they cared for me. And it was really, I think 10 years from now, I'm going to look back and value the people in my life at this time, because they were the ones who kind of made that difference. So I would encourage anybody out there who's, maybe having a difficult time at the moment, or has been, or is heading into it even, you gotta seek out the help that you deserve. Like, at the end of the day, this is you're the person who is suffering from this, and it's up to you to like put in the work to do that. And there are professionals out there that apparently I didn't know that for a while, but there are professionals out there who are actually trained to deal with this, and it's in your right, and you should go and seek that out for your well-being. So 10 years from now, I'm going to look back on this time and be like, that was the era that I started to take control of something that previously had control over me.
Well, yeah, I guess I could separate this into a couple different sort of segments. From a training and like athletic perspective, in 10 years, I would be, I think, glad and proud that I was able to, one, solve a lot of underlying issues, both with Dr. K and with my physical therapist, Adam Kropa, shout out Adam, to stay healthy and train better in the future, because, and that I did not let this get, outside of the injury and the depression thing, get in the way of my routine too much. I was still able to, string together days where I can go to bed every night thinking, while being kind to myself and realistic, that I did everything I could to be the best runner I could be. And I think that if I can string those days together for years and years on end, even if I never actually achieve my goals, I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror 10 years from now and say I gave it a shot, a really good shot too. And I'll be able to cope with that. And from a personal perspective, I think we all have seen, like Dr. K mentioned, the negativity sells, so it's thrown in our face all the time, unfortunately, that this has brought out a lot of ugly things in the world and in people that we know, like me and Lewis talked about depression and a lot of political things. Everybody's struggling right now with something. And I would hope that this was a bit of a catalyst for me to be able to be more compassionate with the people that I'm around, and just openly compassionate. Because like Dr. K mentioned, a lot of times people are struggling with these things, they're just not talking about them. And thinking about all the times where I was feeling miserable and just wanted somebody to talk to about it, but I was afraid to bring it up. And eventually having shared those things with Leah and Lewis and some other people that we know, that they were having similar feelings and similar reservations about sharing them. So if I could, both with my teammates and my friends and the athletes that I coach and stuff like that, if I could be more forthright and open with negative and positive emotional conversations and just make it more commonplace so people can talk about those things around me, I think that this will have helped me massively for the better, for a personal perspective.
I love what Dr. K said about, like, no one's ashamed of saying they went in to go see him about like a knee problem or an ankle problem. But when you compare that to something like severe depression, like, why aren't we just openly talking about something like that? It's so much more serious and can have such more like serious consequences. It's been great talking to people like Silas and Leah and like my roommates Bryce and Abby as well about just destigmatizing the whole thing and just straight up coming home one day and being like, guys, I'm depressed. Like, and I feel depressed now and I probably will tomorrow, and then being like, what can we do? It was the most like just gratifying, and it's honestly one I haven't felt more loved, than in those instances. So knowing that you can have that impact on other people is a really cool thing. I share what Silas said. It's exciting thinking about moving forward and just calling spade a spade, and just being like, you seem like you are struggling with a bit of anxiety, or you seem like you're really low. What can we do about that? And are you okay? That's in our power to do.
And something that I guess you could say made it easier for me to sort of, I don't want to say destigmatize, but it's also made it a little less easier to take seriously, was I don't have a joke about it all the time. I made depression jokes constantly. And when I came home with a diagnosis, I was like, guess what, boys? I'm depressed. While it helped me get it out, and it also led to not being taken seriously sometimes, which I guess that would have been my intention, was to be able to say it without being taken seriously and actually taken up on that conversation. So I think that's another thing to keep in, especially with this younger generation, to keep in mind that if people are making jokes like that all the time, it probably comes from at least some level of truth that they are actually depressed and they're just, using humor to deal with it. And I'll probably not stop making self-deprecating depression jokes ever. But now it's just a little easier for me to talk about in a serious manner too.
Oh, it's not.
Thanks, guys. That was deep, meaningful, good stuff. Dr. K, what are some pitfalls that you see people of all ages, but particularly young people, fall into that can really make things worse as they're trying to maybe make things better or stay neutral, but it's actually having a detrimental effect?
And you're right, it's all ages, trying to sort of fight through it. It's and it's so antithetical to what we do, right? So, but even with injuries, we tell runners, don't, listen to your body, right? So if you have an injury and it's not going away after a couple of days, then do something about it, because if we can get on top of it early, then we can hopefully shorten the duration of it. Well, the same thing happens, I think, in our mental health, is we feel like I can beat this, right? I tell people to, sometimes we feel like, so if you have high blood pressure, well, you take it, it's high, there's a number, it is high, right? And so you can do some things about it. You can go home, you can eat a little better, lose a couple pounds, get rid of the salt. But if it stays up and someone comes back in and say, hey, you got to go on blood pressure medication, it's not usually, well, okay, I tried, and it's just a physiologic thing, right? This is a medical thing. Sometimes what I see people do with sort of anxiety and depression is they sort of think, well, it's all in the brain, or it's all in my head. It is in the brain in the sense that there's neurotransmitters in there, but it's not in your head in the sense you can just be like, well, I'll just be happier today, and that'll work. Now, you can try that, right? Just like someone with high blood pressure can do some things to try to lower the blood pressure. We who are feeling anxious or depressed can work on meditation, we can work on positive thinking. That's all good, but sometimes that's not even enough. And so trying to just continue to fight through it by doing good things, by doing yoga, by meditating, by reading positive self-help books. Those are all good things, but sometimes you just can't fight through it, and then getting and talking to somebody is important. And like these guys said, reaching out and having it be okay. It's okay to have the feeling you're having. It's okay to feel sad or depressed, but it's also okay to say, but I don't want to stay here. I want to do something different about it. And if someone, if you see somebody who's like, yeah, making jokes, or you think that, something's off, it's just reaching out to them, not waiting for them to reach out. And so pitfalls of, like that, like trying to just fight through it without kind of asking for help. It is something that seems like, hey, I'm trying, but sometimes you do need some help. And it's okay to, I guess that's another one, it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to we've heard these guys talk so much about the team, part of the team, the group. There's a reason that we're finally through this pandemic. I don't know, a lot of people are working from home, right? And so there was this, a couple months ago, we'll never have to go back to the office again. We can get rid of all office buildings. No one will ever need to go to an office, right? Because we'll all just work from home. This is the best thing ever. And then it was like, well, maybe this isn't so good because it actually is good to get together with people. And some meetings are okay, maybe not a ton of meetings, but that type of thing. And so I think it is trying to do it by yourself is difficult, and making sure you have a team, and whether or not it's your family team or your high school team, or it's a group of friends, that is your team, and trying to do it alone is a pitfall sometimes. And surrounding yourself with a team is good. They can help point out some things that you might not be able to see. So, and I think the final thing is not listening. Again, if there are people that that love you, that care for you, that are your friends, and they're talking to you about stuff, listen to them. They want they want your best interest. They have your best interest at heart. They know they want what's best for you. So if they're talking to you about things, and even though it's stuff that you might not want to hear, and you think, well, that's not me. I'm not that person. I don't know what they're talking about. If it's someone you know and you love and you trust, and they're talking to you about it, listen to them. I think a pitfall is to just kind of turn that volume down or turn it off. But if it's someone you really trust, listening is something that you want to do and avoid the pitfall of not listening.
Any last piece of advice, words of wisdom, anything you've learned here over the last 4 months you wanted to make sure you had a chance to share?
We are talking a lot about the team, but we also understand that the whole thing has been disrupted, and there are some people who might be watching or hearing this that don't necessarily have aren't as fortunate to have a support group like the ones that have brought us through. And in that instance, I mean, I feel mostly powerless, but like we will always listen to you, and if you need to shoot us a DM, or at least that there's somebody on the other end that has been through similar stuff, and we will take the time to work through that with you. And Dr. K is an awesome resource as well. Probably a better resource, to be honest, but
I think it's important, I don't mean to reach out. I mean, that's what I was going to say, was my thing is reach out. And you're right, you talk about team and support group, and a lot of us have that, and not everybody does. Reach out to somebody, and they'll get you connected up. So even if it ends up ending up with me, that's great. But if it got 2 or 3 people to get to me, that's fine. Reach out to somebody is really important. Don't stay quiet. If something's bothering you, I think a lot of our society is just sort of like, yeah, be tough this thing out. No, talk to somebody. This is the time to seek out some help, and again, like I said, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's really important to do that, to find somebody, because they'll get you. You reach out to somebody, even if it's not the final person that's going to help you, they'll get you to the next person, who they might get you to the next person. But it doesn't happen unless you reach out first. So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't deal with this by yourself.
The one last thing I'd add too is that I fell into the trap for a long time of like, this isn't severe enough for me to go out and seek help, or maybe downplay it to myself or even to others, or make those jokes about it rather than doing anything at all. And there really is, I am pretty firm on this stance, and I don't think there's any, if you just, like something like therapy is for literally anybody. Like, you don't need to be on the brink of doing something really damaging to yourself or somebody else in order to go out and only then seek therapy. Like, use it as a preventative measure, not like oh man, I'm in a really bad spot, so now I'm going to go after that. Like, get on it. And, if you put in the work now, later down the road, it's going to be a lot easier. That's all I have to add.
Yeah, I guess it's a little cliche, or a lot cliche, but just be kind to yourself. Even when I talked about going to bed every night, trying to be the best runner I could be, there are some days where that are not as good as others, where I didn't get as much done, where I didn't do my, nightly stretching, rolling out, or this, that, or the next thing. But not letting that become a reflection of me, and not holding yourself to impossible standards, which is something that I was guilty of for a very, very, very long time, which ended up being extremely counterproductive. But yeah, just using times that you mess up as just motivation to be better the next day. And on a little easier note, you probably need to run your easier runs a little slower.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here tonight, for being part of this discussion. I thought it was a great discussion. So thank you all. Thank you all for watching.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.